Good afternoon, boys and girls. Today is Tuesday, April 28th, and I am here for the third grade read aloud of Superfudge. We are finishing chapter 11 called Catastrophes, and if you don't remember, a catastrophe is like a disaster. And there are a couple catastrophes happening with the Hatcher family lately. One of them had to do with Fudgy learning how to ride his bike. That was definitely a catastrophe because he didn't know how to use his brakes, so he would just jump off his bike. Definitely a catastrophe. Another one had to do with baby Tootsie. She was learning how to walk, which could be a catastrophe because she was getting around and getting everywhere and into everyone's things. And if you have a baby sister or brother, you know what that's like, and that could definitely be disastrous. Okay? And I think that's what they talked about. Okay, so we are going to continue with the rest of the chapter called Catastrophes. Finally, for the end of April, Mom and Dad decided that Fudge had mastered the art of bike riding well enough to ride to school with Daniel, who had learned on his front lawn, just the way he said he would, without a bruise or a scrape anywhere. And it would have turned out okay, if only Fudge had remembered to use his brakes when he got to the bike rack at school. But he didn't. So he crashed into the rack, knocking down a pile of bikes, and he wound up with scraped elbows, scraped knees, and torn jeans. Don't tell Mommy, Fudge said, or she'll never let me ride to school again. I think Mommy's going to notice anyway, I said. You're a mess. I carried him into the nurse's room. Miss Elliott washed off his cuts and bruises with peroxide, and when she did, Fudge let out a howl. Not that I blamed him. I could practically feel the sting myself. But Fudge didn't stop with one howl. He kept it up, making such a racket that Mr. Green, the principal, heard him and came running down the hall. What's going on here? Mr. Green said. Scrape knees and elbows, Miss Elliott said. Scrape knees and elbows, Mr. Green repeated. When I was a boy, I had scraped knees and elbows all the time. Used to roller skate and fall down week after week. Fudge sniffled and said, Too bad you weren't any good at it. Who says I wasn't any good at it? Mr. Green asked. You said you were just falling all the time, Fudge said. That's because I took a lot of chances, Mr. Green said. Now, I want you to hurry back to your classroom because we're having a surprise visitor in a little while. Who is it? Fudge asked. It's a very famous man, someone who writes and illustrates children's books. His name is Brian Pumpkin. Brian Pumpkin is alive? Fudge asked. Alive and well, and on his way to our school. Brian Pumpkin is alive, Fudge said. I never knew that. Did you know that, Peter? I never thought about it, I said. Mr. Green faced Miss Elliott and said, Lucky break for all of us that he's agreed to do a program for our girls and boys. I'm afraid I don't know who he is, Miss Elliott said. Then you must be dumber than I thought, Fudge told her. Oh, God. First you put peroxide on my cuts without blowing to take away the sting, and now you don't know who Brian Pumpkin is? I never blow on cuts, Miss Elliott said. You can spread germs that way. Mommy always blows when she puts on peroxide. Yes, well, Mr. Green said. Let's get back to our classrooms now. It's time for our special program. At 10 o'clock, we all filed into the auditorium. Then Mrs. Morgan, the librarian, introduced Brian Pumpkin, telling us that millions of kids had read and loved his books, and how lucky we were that he was able to make a last-minute stop at our school. Brian Pumpkin walked on stage. He was tall with gray hair and a gray beard. He waved to us. Then he turned and beckoned to someone backstage. I've brought a friend with me, he said. Come on, Uriah, hurry up. The boys and girls are waiting for you. Nobody came out on stage, but Brian Pumpkin pretended that Uriah had. He pretended to be holding Uriah's hand, and he kept talking to him as if he were really there. I thought, either this guy is a real wacko, or he's a great actor. Finally, he looked out at the audience and asked if any of us saw Uriah. Someone down front called out, I see him! I didn't even have to look. I knew who that voice belonged to. You see, Brian Pumpkin told the rest of us. One of you can see Uriah. Come on up here, young man. Next thing I knew, Fudge was on stage. I slid down in my seat. What's your name, young man? Fudge. That's an unusual name, Brian Pumpkin said. I know it, Fudge said. How would you feel about helping me out today, Fudge? It's a real privilege, Fudge said. I couldn't believe it. He'd finally learned how to use that word correctly. You could see that Brian Pumpkin was impressed. He said, Well, it's a real privilege for me, too. That makes it unanimous, Fudge said. My, you certainly have an impressive vocabulary, Brian Pumpkin said. I learn a lot of words at home. That's wonderful. Some of them I'm not allowed to say in school. Some of them my bird can say. His name is Uncle Feather. I slid lower down in my seat. What grade are you in, Fudge? Brian Pumpkin asked. Kindergarten. Who is your teacher? I started out in Ratface's. Oh, I'm sorry, my fault. I started out in Ratface's class, but now I'm in Miss Zip's class. She's a lot nicer than Ratface. Boy, I covered my face with my hands. Let's get on with our chalk talk now, shall we? Brian Pumpkin said. What's a chalk talk? Fudge asked. I'm going to sit down at my easel, Brian Pumpkin said, walking across the stage. And you're going to describe a person to me, and I'm going to draw the person you describe. Do you think you can do that? Yes, Fudge said. It's a man. Oh, I'll need more help than that, Brian Pumpkin said, picking up a piece of chalk. Is he tall or short? He's tall, Fudge said, and he's got a fat belly that hangs over his pants. And he's mostly bald, but he's got some hair around the edges, and he wears glasses. And he's got a pointy nose and a mustache that curls down around his mouth. Brian Pumpkin was drawing as fast as Fudge was talking. And he's got a crooked front tooth, and his feet are very long, and he walks like this, Fudge said, giving us a demonstration. Like a duck? Brian Pumpkin asked. Yes, Fudge said. All of a sudden, I knew who Fudge was describing, and I wanted to get out of the auditorium as fast as I could. But then Fudge looked out at the audience and called, Where are you, Peter? I can't see you. And I knew that I couldn't get up without everyone looking at me. So I slouched down as low as I could and didn't answer. Peter, can you see me? I let out a groan. Joanne, who was sitting behind me, giggled. I can't find my brother, Fudge told Brian Pumpkin. You'll find him later, Brian Pumpkin said. Now, you haven't told me what this man is wearing. So who do you think the man is? I'm thinking it might be the principal. I'm not sure. Oh, Fudge said. He's wearing a blue shirt and a tie with stripes, and brown pants and brown socks, and brown shoes and brown shoelaces. Brown shoelaces, Brian Pumpkin repeated. Okay, there we are. He brushed off his hands and held up the picture. Does he look like anyone you know, Fudge? Yes, Fudge said. Who? Brian Pumpkin asked. Mr. Green, Fudge said. The audience laughed. Brian Pumpkin smiled. Who was Mr. Green? The principal, Fudge said. Now the audience roared. Oh dear, Brian Pumpkin said. Oh my. He put his hand to his mouth, and you could see that he was trying hard not to laugh. Mr. Green went up on stage then and introduced himself to Brian Pumpkin. They shook hands. Mr. Green said, I think that's a wonderful drawing, and I'd like to have it for my office. Would you sign it for me? Certainly, Brian Pumpkin said. I'm very glad you like it. He signed his name across the drawing and handed it to Mr. Green. Everyone clapped. Then Fudge said, Mr. Green, was this a catastrophe? And Mr. Green laughed and said, Not quite, Fudge, but I'm sure you'll try harder next time. I was sure too. So I have to say that's a pretty cool principle. He didn't get upset, he didn't get mad, he actually wanted to keep the illustration that the author and illustrator drew of him. So that was a great chapter. I think that was one of my favorite chapters. Fudge was really funny in that one. And I love books that make me laugh, just like I love movies that make me laugh. So we will go on. We are almost done with this book. We only have a few more chapters, and then we'll move on to another another book. I think we only actually have one more chapter left. So we will start that chapter tomorrow. And I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. It's actually sunny out, so hopefully you'll get out there and play. Talk to y'all later. Bye.